Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Hagedorn, and this is Team F, along with my colleagues Leigh, Cramer, Kingston, and Dhruv, Sarin. Today, we're going to talk about how we're going to secure containers here in the United States. Now, here's a little quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start talking about the legislative framework we're building in, some of the other things that are built into our model, some of the major challenges we're going to be addressing, some ways we looked at going through that, and then eventually what we ended up coming into our solution framework, as well as how we're going to go about implementing that in our benchmarks. If we had to put our entire presentation together into one slide, it would look something like this. New legislation requires 100% screening of all cargo in foreign ports. However, foreign countries are not too interested in bearing the costs of implementing that strategy. So what we are forced to recognize is that in the short run, we have a limited capacity to be screening, and we're going to be trying to focus our screening capacity on the highest threat items by expanding threat assessment models, and we're going to be using new technologies to expand our threat capacity so that over time we're going to be able to scan more and more containers, eventually reaching our mandate. Now, the beginnings of this case start with the 9/11 Commission report, in which they wrote about a potential scenario in which a nuclear device put in a shipping container was, while waiting to be screened in the U.S. ports, would detonate and pollute an entire port, and they pointed out that it's not enough to begin searching containers when it arrives in the United States. Congress implemented in 2007 a mandate that 100% of foreign cargo containers be scanned before arriving in the United States in another port, and instructed the Secretary of Homeland Security to get that implemented by 2012 unless certain conditions met. Our plan builds this as our legislative framework that we're launching on to be answering. It's worth noting for us that there are 6 conditions, feasibility conditions. If 2 of those can't be met, the Secretary of Homeland Security can extend the deadline. Especially worth pointing out is if the system cannot be deployed in foreign ports, and if there's a significant negative impact onto trade. Those 2 extensions we're anticipating to be present for a fair bit of time and to extend it in the future. And indeed, in fact, recently the deadline was extended December of this year into 2014. And that's sort of the legislative framework from which we're coming in. My colleague Dhruv is going to talk a little bit about some of the other pieces of this puzzle that we laid out to begin with.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so this slide basically talks about some of our assumptions. For one thing, we assume that there's a multi-layered security system in place right now, and we are only basically making sure one layer, that's the foreign screening, is what we're in charge of. We assume the other organizations are going to continue doing what they've been doing up to now, and they're going to proceed with that. We also assume that both the US government as well as other governments want to continue doing trade. We can't just seal our borders and say, like, we're done. So that's one of our other budgets. Then we're working with a limited budget. We don't have all the money. We have to find something that's feasible and that can fit within those constraints. And then potential collaboration with the private sector is necessary because they already have some existing technologies we might want to take advantage of, so we do plan on working with them. And lastly, we assume the Congress will support us in our budget. Then here are some key distinctions we made between pre-screening and screening. Pre-screening is basically taking information, passing it through the threat assessment model, and coming up with high-risk containers. Screening, on the other hand, is actually using non-intrusive inspection equipment and actually running these containers through them and or secondary physical examinations and using sniffer dogs. And now I'm going to pass it. Sorry, the mission statement. So using that, we developed a mission statement, which is basically to create an efficient process of security that's thorough and effective by working with the global community to find a balance that protects the American people and infrastructure, lessening the burden on global trade. And now Christian's going to talk about some of the challenges we face.
Thank you. So, as always, when you're trying to implement a new program, there are always going to be challenges. So, some things that we came across is that foreign countries are concerned about the 100% screening doctrine. So, the European economists have found it infeasible. Why? Excessive costs, inadequate facilities and infrastructure, increased transportation costs, and it would reduce the US-European trade by over $38 billion a year. We also found that the US cannot create a mandate to put into foreign countries, to mandate things happening in things that are not currently owned by the United States. We have to do everything within the U.S. waters or U.S. land. Also, that in the next 20 years, the volume of cargo will double. So we have to factor that into how we continue moving forward with this. So we came up with a few approaches. So we thought, okay, let's start in the foreign ports and then see how we can think about this. So a mandate 100% screening in foreign ports. Well, we could be met with a lot of international opposition. Lots of people don't want to do it, as we already see it with the EU. So then we moved closer to home. Let's move into the US waters. Let's create floating docks. One issue with this is that it was very costly and it was just very impractical. We thought, okay, let's scan them in the US ports. At that point, it was too little too late. If there was something that was already in the US, it can create a big issue. Then we thought, okay, let's create some security tariffs. If they don't want to be screened, we'll tax them to screen them in the US. Our issue with this is that we create retaliatory measures, and also they're already here. And they can pay the fine, and it'll already be here and be in our system. So we decided to go with a different approach, which Sam will talk about.
The framework that we ended up coming with recognizes that there are the current limitations on foreign governments' interests in bearing these costs and how we're going to be working around it. It's a three-pronged strategy. Our first strategy is to expand the existing threat assessment models. So that would be U.S. government with other countries working together to expand those programs. Our second prong is working on establishing a global standard for pre-screening all cargoes. That would be working government to government. And then our final prong is to be working on developing more efficient technologies, building more capacity for going through with some screening. And we're going to dive a little bit into each of these programs. We're going to begin with the first prong, expanding our existing programs, and Leigh Cramer is going to talk a little bit more about that.
So as Sam mentioned, this is our first prong, which is an overview of the Container Security Initiative. This is a government-to-government partnership where we include 34 countries into our program. By using a threat assessment model, we are able to identify which high-risk containers are coming into the United States and be able to screen those. So what we found was that in 2006, 86% of imports were CSI pre-screened. That leaves 14% not CSI pre-screened. In 2009, 82% of imports were CSI pre-screened. That allows us to conclude that the volume of non-CSI items is increasing. So how are we going to combat this issue? What are we going to do? What I found by stratifying our non-CSI members from CSI members is that these top 10 countries could easily contribute to a better security system. So for example, if you look at Indonesia, that's 1.9% of our annual volume. If we could include it into our system, that's going to increase our ability to have better security. By doing this, we use influential leaders in the area surrounding them. For example, Malaysia, Singapore. And they're going to want to join because if they don't, comparatively, they're behind on this program. And the benefit also by joining the program is a reciprocity system that allows you to go through U.S. customs system quicker. And this efficiency allows 9.7% increase in trade flows because one, corruption control is better, and two, the transparency in customs. And now I'm going to turn it over to talk about solutions and framework.
Thank you. So our second prong is to create a global standard. So what does that mean? So our idea is to expand the CSI to put it into a global network. So we thought, let's take it up with the World Customs Organization. Let's host a conference and let's get all the voices under one roof, in one room. So our implementation strategy with that is to use the appreciative inquiry technique. This would mean to have 4 different stages: discovering, building, designing, and sustaining. What that means that people will talk about what is wrong, what is missing. Then we talk about how can we improve it, how can we address what is missing, and create a minimal standard for that everybody can agree on and then build on independently. Then we design this and we present it to be accepted. And once it is accepted, we talk, how do we make sure this sticks? That it's not something that's going to be around for a year or two, and then somebody's going to say, oh no, I don't want to do it, and drop out. The benefit of this is that everybody feels as if they've had a say and they're more likely to stick around with this because they had a say in making it happen. So to talk about research technology,
So I'm going to basically talk about the use of research and technology, which is our third prong. And we basically feel if we invest heavily in research and technology, we can expand our screening capacity and thereby scan more and reach our mandate. Now, to do this, we first developed some research goals. So our research goals were basically to improve efficiency, which includes lowering cycle times and making scanning faster, lower the false alarm rates, and obviously make it cheaper because that's one of our biggest concerns. Now to do this, we have 4 programs. The first one is to explore existing technologies within the private sector, since some of them do already exist, and I'll go into that in a little. And then we have research grants for projects we feel have potential. We have case competitions at engineering school to actually build interest in it and actually come up with new innovations. And then for solutions which are viable, we will do pilot programs and see how those turn out. Now this right here is what's currently in place in the Secure Freight Initiative facilities. Now it's a 3-step system. The problem with it though, it's really expensive, it's time consuming since there are constraints at the speed at which trucks can pass through, and there are possible health risks for truck drivers which unions are against. And so now here we're going to talk about some new innovative technologies we feel could actually be implemented and actually speed up the process. The first one is automatic identification of threats. That basically means the software itself detects things that could be threats and color codes them. This saves on training costs as well as labor costs. The second is the crane-based radiation detection system. That basically involves sensors in the spreader bar, and the advantage of that is, one, it allows for transshipments, which some of the current projects don't. And it also has scanning during normal operations, so you're not actually taking extra time out for it. The last one is smart containers, which, if possible, probably the best alternative. These are basically containers that contain sensors which tell you if there's an intrusion, if there are changes in temperature, if someone's entered. And it also actually can detect radioactive substances and weapons. And the advantages are it secures in high value chain, so shippers have some interest in actually investing in these. And it's relatively cheap, with one project saying they cost about $50 to $100 per container. And now I'm going to give it back to Leigh, who's going to talk about the communication aspect.
So as you can see, we are sticking with the prong model where there's 3 different areas. And in each area, we identify our audience, our stakeholders, their interests, and what methods we can use to communicate with them. So for example, as you look in prong 1, we have 10 specific countries that we're trying to reach. There's foreign ports we need to talk to, the CPP. Exporters and CSI have competitive advantages. That is their main interest. So how do we give this message? How do we communicate this? By giving cost-benefit analyses, we can actually have a paper in front of them that says, what is this going to do for your country, and why is it good? We'll also have State Department outreach, we'll have liaisons, so there's constant feedback with the progress of how this project is working. What is working for them, how does this work with the country specifically, and so forth. So it'll be constant communication and an overall relationship. In prong 2, we talk about our major exporters, China, India, the EU, and developing countries, world customs organizations, and we also want to stress that their interests are all nations benefit from secure trade. We all want secure trade. And that global standards add simplicity. So we use a declaration of intent, global conferences, proposed G8 resolutions. Prong 3, we talk about think tanks, private enterprises, research universities. We want to stress that there is funding for this research. So having this research funding, we're able to have new innovations by using college outreach, getting the newest wave of students to be joining on in this project. So we use the timeline and a benchmarks process. And as you can see, in each prong, we want to show that there's a progress from 2010 to 2020. As you can see in prong 1, we want to be increasing the amount of pre-screening. In prong 2, we want to make sure that we are reaching a global standard by the end of 2020. In prong 3, we want to make sure that there are viable technologies. And these are all happening concurrently with each other. We're using decision points as active points to say, what is it that we want to do? Pause, evaluate, move on. So what is working? So for example, if you look at the 6-month period, we want to prioritize countries that are viable. So that is our 10 countries. When we reach 3 years, we might want to expand this. But at those points, we want to see, have we reached that mark? What do we do from now? Do we have to change our process based on how far we have progressed? Is our plan sticking with the timeline that we want, or do we have to alter it to make it better? As well as, because this is a layered system, other areas might move faster, so we want to make sure that we're constantly adjusting. And now, we leave it to questions for you.
Congratulations, that was very good. And I really like the way you talked about some of the stakeholders that are there. Can you talk a little bit about some of the incentives for those stakeholders and why they might want to collaborate with your approach?
Well, as we said here, that there are very different interests from many different stakeholders. Each one has a different reason for being in the process, and yet they all have the same goal. They want to make things safe, and they want to make sure that everything is working to the best of its ability and make money at the same time in the private sector. So here they provide this through competitive advantages, showing them this is what you get out of it. And you know, as everything is more secure in different ports in different areas, we have more ability to continue this chain. And if everybody's more secure, everybody's more able to get things through faster, and speed is always a necessity when we work in this area.
As Christian mentioned, if you look at every single problem that we have posted here, they're all interrelated, so the incentives are also integrated. So if you look at this, if we include our next 10 countries into this process, not only are they going to benefit from efficiency and getting their products quickly to the United States or within countries, but they are going to be able to have access to newer technologies. So by being in this global standard, you're benefiting on all 3 different areas.
And one of the things we noticed when we were doing some of our background and preparing for this case was that a lot of the ports currently aren't designed with this security infrastructure in mind, and that made it really tough for us. And so one of the things that's going to be gained as a global standard starts to evolve through this collaborative process is that it's going to be more uniform, that technologies can be applied. There's going to be easier to sort of integrate these advantages that are coming in with our program. And also countries are going to be able to benefit from on the shipping side of having a common set of standards that they know how to meet. Right now, the fact is a lot of the cargo that's going around in the world, countries don't know what it is. And the threat of a nuclear device or other weapons being detonated isn't just something limited to U.S. ports. We're certainly not the only target, and that's really going to be some of our outreach to some of these major exporting countries. The big 800-pound gorillas in the room definitely have an interest to know that their ports are secure as well.
Relative to the CSI screening approach, and particularly looking at the next target list of countries that you're focusing on, what's the downside here of just saying to these countries, given that the highest level of trade we're looking at here from an export volume perspective is less than 3%? What's the downside of just saying comply by X time frame, or we trade with you?
Okay, it's I guess what we're saying is it's not as much of a harsh approach. We're trying to use our incentives and our basically what benefits we're going to use. I know since 2006, India has been on the fringe, where it's, I think, a lack of communication. And so it's not a harsh approach if you don't join. We're trying to, it's almost a persuasion is if you adopt this, you're going to become part of a larger community. So it's not, if you don't join, we're going to hate you. It's, why don't you join us? It's going to benefit.
Right, I understand that. I'm just wondering what the downside of the stick approach. You've got the carrot on the one hand. I mean, do we need a stick on the other hand? And what's the downside of having one of each, if you like?
Another downside is, as we said in assumptions, we're assuming we want to continue doing trade, because it may seem like 2.7%, but when you actually put that in terms of volume, it's a big number. I mean, later on we actually have the number of volumes, and it's a significant volume that's coming in. So while it might seem like nothing, if you look at it there, it's actually 389, 191, and that's TEUs. That's those many containers, which we're saying we don't want them in. We just don't want them. And that also affects where they can retaliate, and they can be like, all right, you know what? If you don't want to do that, great. Some of them need us more, but they're gonna be like, fine, then we cut it off both ways. We'll find different supplies for our products. You lose imports as well.
And that was something that we evaluated in if we go to our challenges, or to our other approaches that we looked at. We sort of looked at two different cases. Well, what if we had countries that didn't do the scanning? What if we made them pay their way to scanning them here in the United States? And also in just a straight up mandate of 100% screening. One of the other issues that we weren't clear would be a good move would be if that would be legal in our World Trade Framework, if World Trade Organization regulations would let us just embargo countries openly. And so there's definitely going to be some implications on a global scale, and our position was that open trade was something that was valuable to the United States and valuable to other countries, and that we were not in a position to be making that call. I think that would be something probably above OTS's decision-making point, that we could cut off trade with countries.
Okay, thank you.
So I understand that there's one carrier that's carrying cargo for like over approximately 100 different companies. How did that information kind of factor into your strategy?
Well, again, with that's actually why we ruled out the CTPAT, that program, because we know that multiple companies put in the same containers, so we can't really do it scanning it at source by saying the suppliers are okay, so the containers are okay. So that way we moved up the supply chain. We actually did analyze the risk throughout the supply chain, if you look here. So we found that securing the supply chain wouldn't be the best strategy to do it. The best way to do it would in fact be on a multiple levels thing, because here while we can do it across the chain, it wouldn't be quite as effective.
And certainly for countries, or for companies that operate in multiple countries, there are benefits from standardization. That simplifying that process and not having a wide range of regulations will allow them to be more efficient in what they're doing.
You showed some statistics where pre-screening percentages decreased. Do you have an understanding of where that came from? Why that number would go down?
Okay.
Because you would intuitively think it would go up. So I'm just curious.
Right, so we found in 2006, 86 and 82%. So what we did was we added the volumes of all of the countries that weren't in CSI programming from a 2009 annual report. And then we added those numbers divided by the whole volume, and we actually found that 82%, and that had decreased. So that was kind of shocking in ourselves. And then when we said, okay, well, if the top 10 countries joined us, or adopted the program, that would increase to pre-screening 95%. So it was.
But why would pre-screening go down? What would cause it to go down?
I mean, with countries like India growing, who are actually some of the key sources, so with their growth, their imports have increased as well, and with that, the overall numbers decreased, as in the percentages decreased.
So basically non-CSI volume.
So if you look at your three prongs, you've got three things that you want to try to do to help move this in the right direction. Relative to the costs of achieving real impact in these three, where's the money going to get spent? What's the relative cost of implementing each of these, and cost as it aligns to the benefit that you expect to get from that particular prong?
So we did a budget analysis for the 3 different prongs. So for prong 1, we did an example based on an Indonesian model using the port in Jakarta. So we did some research and found that about a 200 square meter office would cost about $30,480 a year. And then the field staff came up with a round number for about 3 staff members to make sure that everything is working. The cost of living is, we did some research using the information from the United States security staff. Sorry. And we did some, looked at history of what it costs to have an office in a foreign country. And created total cost of about $859,690 to have an office for a year in Jakarta. So if we try to put these in the 10 major countries, we know that each country is going to be a little different in terms of cost of living, in terms of cost of having an office. So we estimate it would be approximately $10 million a year for 10 offices in these ports. And prong 2, we thought, okay, we have to create a whole conference to bring people to have planners, have travel expenses, conference expenses, and that came to a total of $1,750,000 to bring everyone to the table. So we can get this dialogue going and get this minimal standard working. So then we thought, okay, well, what would it cost for us to implement this standard? So we came up using 15 port upgrades based on an example we got from Buenos Aires in 2004. We see it would cost us $525 million to upgrade 15 different ports.
U.S. ports?
Yes.
And the issue is if it's a global standard that the exporting country bears the cost of the pre-screening. The U.S. is going to be leading the charge on this at some point. We're going to implement. This is the significant cost in our model, and definitely there's a decision point in which Congress is ratifying that global standard, where we imagine there'll be a conversation.
Perhaps one or two.
So then in prong 3, we looked at some research grants. We thought, okay, we'll have 4 different research grants at $4 million each. So it gives about $16 million for research grants. And a feasibility study, we got the number 20 million off of an FSI pilot program. And then case competition, we put in $100,000 thinking, we have some very good bagels at these competitions. But in terms of personnel, we thought we need people who are going to be overseeing everything that we're doing, making sure that each stage of research grants, feasibility studies, case competitions are all working, and making sure we're getting to the level of information that we need. Then we, of course, we had to put in travel costs and administrative expenses. It came to a total cost of $37,312,000. Most of this is a one-time cost, considering the research grants and feasibility studies. But if we decide to do more of them, that cost can increase.
Thank you, guys.